Hello guys, this is the Gaming Revolution here and welcome back to an all new Call of Duty Warzone video. So with the release of a Season 3 that introduced the brand new Verdansk 84 map, we learnt a lot of information about the backstory and the origins for Warzone's creation, thanks to an interview with Infinity Ward published by the Washington Post that I will leave a link to down in this video's description. In this video I want to go over all of the juicy information that this article displays, and it is titled Project Magma, the untold origins of Verdansk, the Gulag, and Call of Duty Warzone. How Infinity Ward disrupted Call of Duty and brought 100 million players into the franchise's big, bold battle royale. So yes, that is right, Project Magma is the codename for Warzone before it released. And we learned so much from this article that I'll continue with in a second, but this video has been kindly sponsored by Nvidia GeForce RTX and Scan Computers. Scan is the UK's leading supplier in computer hardware and components, and they've partnered up with Nvidia to supply a range of GeForce RTX 30 series laptops that you can check out via the link in this video's description. Specifically, today we're going to be taking a look at the Asus Strix Scar 15-inch laptop, perfect for playing Warzone on the go. Like I've talked about in prior videos, with the release of Season 3, Warzone now supports Nvidia's DLSS, which uses artificial intelligence to boost your frame rates whilst generating sharp and detailed images. The extra performance means that your RTX GPU can now play at higher resolutions and graphics settings. Simply enable DLSS in the Warzone graphics menu, like you can see from the gameplay in the background. Fit for 1080p, 1440p, and 4K maximum performance. Make sure to use max quality or quality mode for DLSS, don't use balanced, performance, or ultra performance. In addition, Warzone supports Nvidia Reflex, which reduces your system latency and gives a more responsive gaming experience, and you can simply turn it on from the game's menu as well. And I will talk more about the specs of the laptop later on in this video. So the article starts off discussing about Patrick Kelly, who is the co-studio head at Infinity Ward, and he remembered the pitch meeting vividly. The room full of developers and Activision executives had convened at Infinity Ward's offices in the Woodland Hills in California in early 2018. So Warzone has been a work in progress for quite some time. It was time for Kelly and his longtime colleague Dave Stoll, who together serve as the co-studio heads for Infinity Ward, to pitch their big idea. The project was codenamed Magma, and the plan was to create the biggest ever battle royale, one tied to the world of the studio's planned 29 release Modern Warfare. Upon completion, the project would be rechristened as Warzone. So an interesting thing is that it seems like this was actually concepted during Blackout's development. If you guys are unaware, David Vonderhaar originally pitched Blackout to be called Warzone, but they ended up, I guess, taking that title for Modern Warfare's Battle Royale instead. That will now serve as the main hub for all Call of Duty Battle Royales going forward. So in this interview, Kelly began to reenact his pitch room with Activision. He said, "We want to have the same fidelity in Warzone as the rest of the game, and we want players to be able to go in every one of the buildings, and we want to have these mission contracts, and we want to have really unique geography all over the world." I do want to say about that, Warzone has really inaccurate geography. If you will have noticed, it's meant to be set in a made-up country, which is Kostovia, which is basically meant to be Russia, and for some weird reason Rebirth Island takes place right outside of it, even though from the maps in the game it doesn't appear to be set near the sea. And now we know from Black Ops Cold War Season 3 cutscene that Verdansk actually takes place right next to Mount Yamantau, one of the mountains that makes up the Ural Mountains. Again, the geography doesn't really make much sense, but I've already talked about that in prior videos. So yeah, I guess they set up for accurate geography, but maybe at the time they didn't plan for Black Ops Cold War and Modern Warfare to connect, so it's caused a lot of inaccuracies to occur. He went on to say, "And by the way, this is going to be a massive art undertaking. This would be a massive technical undertaking. We don't have the gameplay entirely figured out yet," but it didn't stop there. The pitch was bold, big, and perhaps even a little too big. Some people were concerned, like, have you gone too far with this? You know, is this too big of a bite to take? The Call of Duty franchise was already developing a Battle Royale mode, which was Blackout in Black Ops 4, which debuted later that year in 2018. But Kelly and Stoll's vision was to integrate it better with the look, feel, and realism they were creating with the Modern Warfare reboot. I personally don't really like the realism aspect of Modern Warfare. I know a lot of people do, and I understand what they were going for with Warzone, but personally I like the more arcade arcadey Call of Duty games that Treyarch seem to produce, but it's very evident that Warzone and Modern Warfare have been huge successes, so people definitely like that realism factor. I guess Blackout was a trial run, with Warzone being the second attempt, having a lot more time and energy put into it. According to Kelly, the worry in the room wasn't stepping on Treyarch's toes, but rather the volume of work it would require to successfully deliver the vision Kelly described. So Warzone is noticeably very different from Blackout. In a lot of ways, it's a lot better. It obviously has way better mechanics. It doesn't have the dodgy armor system. I think it's a bit less cluttered without having all the different attachments and stuff like that. At the same time though, I personally think that Blackout had more fun factor. It was more vibrant. It had a lot more fun Easter eggs. It was way more arcadey, obviously. I do think that Warzone is overall the better battle royale, but it is very distinctively different from Blackout. Both have their strengths and weaknesses. Warzone comes on top overall, I think. I wish they did have more of a mixture of Blackout features with Warzone, but it's evident they didn't want to step on Treyarch's toes, and as you guys know, apparently there was going to be a Blackout 2, which was going to feature this Ural Mountains map that ended up being cancelled and salvaged for Fireteam in Black Ops Cold War's multiplayer and also the Outbreak Zombies mode. So I wonder if we'll ever see that in the future in Warzone. Probably not though, because like they just stated, they want it to be distinctively different from Blackout. They said Blackout was never the concern. The concern was, let me get this straight, you don't have the technology yet, you don't have the bandwidth to do the art for the thing yet, and you don't have the gameplay entirely sorted out. But his rebuttal was that they will. So when they were first trying to plan it out, they had really no idea what they were going to do exactly, but they knew they were going to accomplish it. They didn't even have the technology at the time, but thankfully they've managed to update the engine over the years with Modern Warfare that's going to be used for future Call of Duty games as well, that's allowed for larger player counts. So Warzone obviously released on March 10th, 2020, which took quite a while, and it released as a free-to-play cross-platform experience, which definitely helped it, unlike Blackout, which you had to pay for Black Ops Cold War to access. It also didn't have crossplay. That hindered the mode a bunch. I wonder what Blackout would have been like if it was treated the same as Warzone. Black Ops 4 got done dirty. Modern Warfare got very lucky with it being the first Call of Duty game with free DLC, crossplay, and a free-to-play battle royale experience. I think Black Ops 4 could have been a lot better, because just think about it. If Blackout had been free-to-play, yes, some of the mechanics were dodgy, but if more people were playing it, they probably would have been more inclined to throw money at it and improve those systems. So bringing it back to discussing about the Asus Strix Scar 15-inch laptop. It features the latest GeForce RTX 3080 flagship laptop GPU with up to 16GB of G6 memory. It powers the world's fastest laptops for gamers and creators alike. It's able to deliver 100 plus frames per second with ultra settings at 1440p. Furthermore, it supports Nvidia's Dynamic Boost 2.0 technology. Dynamic Boost efficiently switches power between the CPU and GPU, allowing whatever is needed most to be boosted. That means more power for the GPU in games, boosting frame rates even higher. It features the Ryzen 9 5900 Hex CPU. Liquid Metal enables CPU overclocking, higher clock speeds with noise under 45 decibels. This cutting-edge 15.6-inch laptop houses a QHD 2560 x 1440 gaming display with 165Hz per 3 milliseconds. That takes you to the next frontier of professional esports speeds. With an accurate optical mechanical keyboard, an adaptive sync for smooth gameplay, and it also features a slim bezel 85% screen-to-body ratio. The laptop currently sells for around £2,600, which I think is a very good deal for this beastly gaming PC. It is a bit on the pricey side, but if you are looking for a really solid laptop, this is the way to go. Or you can simply go for a monthly payment plan instead. But if you check out the link to scan in this video's description, you will be able to see a wide range of GeForce RTX 30 series laptops to choose from if you want to go for a cheaper one that better suits you. Anyways, the article goes on to say work began on the project in 2017, long before Kelly and Stoll's pitch meeting, and started with the now famous map of the fictional city of Verdansk. Earlier that year, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, better known as PUBG, was at the start of its upsurge in popularity, and Kelly was enjoying his time in that battle royale with his son. So much so, he wanted to recreate it in a Call of Duty mold. The thing I started thinking about was, how long are the legs on battle royale, and what are the things I love and don't love about it? And then it went to, what if we were to do something like this? We have started having discussions internally internally about questions like, if we were to build a big space, what would that look like, what would it feel like, and we immediately came to the conclusion we want to build something that was real. So apparently discussion for this began all the way back in 2017. The only issue I have with this is I do know that the Verdansk map was originally made for Spec Ops in Modern Warfare. They were entirely separate maps, they then combined the maps together to create the Battle Royale map, and that literally only began production early 2019, I believe. So I feel like some of this story is a bit inaccurate. I feel like, and I don't mean to call them out here, but it just seems like they're trying to correct the past a little bit to tell more of a complete story, because it always looks great if you have an awesome origin story, but some of this just sounds really off from some of the things that I had heard prior to release. I was told that Ravensoft did the majority of the work on the Verdansk map, and it was originally, as I was saying, separate locations within Spec Ops. They then combined all of these sections together because Spec Ops was meant to be some sort of semi-open world experience. You could go from point of interest to point of interest, carrying out different objectives and stuff like that. They ended up not getting that working properly. It was very buggy, so that's why you only play on separate sections within Spec Ops, and Spec Ops in general ended up being a huge flop. But yeah, they ended up reutilizing the Spec Ops map to work for Battle Royale, and they adjusted it for Battle Royale. I don't even know if the original plan was to have it for Battle Royale, because it literally only really became a thing in early 2019. Before then, there was no Battle Royale really being worked on. I mean, it was probably being talked about and being worked on somewhat, but it never became even playable until early 2019. And there was even talks multiple times of it potentially getting cancelled, so as I was saying, I don't really know if this story is as accurate as they're making it out to be. Anyways, it goes on to say, with that in mind, the team started looking at real cities to replicate in the game. We looked a lot at Donetsk in Ukraine and other cities, similar cities, and we started talking about it. So yeah, you may have noticed that part of the Verdansk map is actually based off of Donetsk in Ukraine. It's actually codenamed that in the files of the game as well, but he said originally I wanted to build it based off of Kabul, which is Afghan's capital city. He said the appeal was less the city's prominence in the recent global events and more its benefit in terms of gameplay logistics. So yeah, Warzone was almost set in Afghanistan. He went on to say, if you think about it in terms of memory, when he looked at these images and data that you had, so many structures and buildings were going to be the same texture sets, the same material sets, Kelly said, and it was like, okay, this makes sense memory-wise. So basically, the reason why Afghan made sense was because of the fact that all of the textures would be very similar. Obviously, because it's a very sandy region, basically the entire color scheme would be browns and yellows and oranges and stuff like that, which I guess is very similar to Verdansk. The color scheme isn't that appealing, and that's my personal complaint with it. It does seem like from this article they were going with this realistic standpoint and this map that was very washed out, kind of samey, if that's the right term to use, which I personally don't like. I don't mean to be criticizing this as I'm going through this article, but that's just my personal take on Warzone. I prefer Blackout's color scheme. It's more vibrant, it's more fun, it's more arcadey, whereas this is a lot more meant to be realistic, which I don't know, some people prefer, and it is interesting to kind of hear about the developers' viewpoints on these kinds of things. It doesn't really make much sense though, because they were striving for realism, then they started throwing that out of the window with the zombie stuff, which was very fun with the Haunting of Verdansk. That was one of the funnest things they've ever done in Warzone. So it seems like somewhere along the lines, they were planning for all this realism, then they decided to make it more quirky, more similar to what Treyarch are known for with the zombie stuff, which I think is a good thing. It just kind of seems like Warzone is kind of having a bit of a tonality crisis where they don't exactly know what they want to do with it. They kind of have some really arcadey aspects and a lot more fun factor, and then there's parts of the game that want to be really realistic as well. But then they have bright, flashy tracer rounds and camos. So there is a massive tonality clash, and it seems like the game doesn't really have a proper identity, and it's having a bit of an identity crisis. So I guess that's a bit of a reason for Warzone kind of being a bit boring aesthetically speaking, because they purposefully did that so that they could reuse textures and stuff like that. The article goes on to say, while it would aid requirements for memory and machines, it created a memory problem for players. The team really quickly came back and said players are never going to know where they are on the ground if everything looks the same. So that makes complete sense, and what this means is that they must have had an Afghan map working in the game at some point if QA testers were playing it. So I guess that just got thrown in the bin or got reworked into Verdansk. So Verdansk, although it's very samey, the color scheme is pretty much the same throughout. I guess it's way better than if it was going to be an Afghan map. It would have been even less visually appealing and even less vibrant colors. Verdansk 84 does a much better job with the color scheme though. I still don't think it's perfect though. It still looks very washed out. If you do compare it to a map like the Ural Mountains, which is very in your face and very pop-eye. So the developers iterated and pivoted. Rather than making buildings and other prominent features similar as on other massive multiplayer maps, they decided to differentiate structures. They started by building a dense urban area where players could enter and ascend buildings. The cityscape grew, Kelly said. Some early versions of the map were even bigger than Verdansk's current footprint. So yeah, it almost ended up being huge. I really wish we could see some of the early prototypes of Verdansk. I guess it was never planned to even be Verdansk. It was planned to be some Afghan map, it was merged into something else, and it eventually became Verdansk. Kelly went on to say it's funny because it was starting to get out of control. What happened was there are some builders working on this and they just kept building and building and building. We were going to end up with this space that was going to be miles and miles and miles of city. It was like, whoa, this is getting away from us here. We've got to rein this in a bit. And part of the reason was that we knew we were going to have certain physical limitations, you know, like how many players can actually be supported in the world. So yeah, a lot of people complain that Verdansk has way too many buildings and way too many high skyscrapers. Well, it almost ended up being way worse. In early development, the map was a lot larger and the map was literally just a massive city. At least they've scaled it back now. It does seem like since they had loads of different people working on different sections of the map that it just became cluttered and all over the place. Game development is really weird. According to Kelly and Stoll, it was the player count that ultimately determined the size of the map. The team wanted to double the standard set by PUBG and Fortnite, and so they were like, okay, 200 players, Kelly said. How big a space really makes sense? So I do know they had issues reaching 200 players, so they had to get the tech up to standard. Luckily, they managed to pull off 200 players. I know there's even been talks of higher player counts, maybe sometime in the future of like 250 players and stuff like that. But originally, the map was almost larger, which would have supported a larger player count, but the technology just couldn't support that. I know they had a bunch of issues with the player counts. It took them a while to get that working. They had to eventually scale it up. There was a bunch of glitches and bugs, and that's why it didn't release when Modern Warfare released. It was pushed back multiple times. It goes on to say, beyond the skyscrapers of the cityscape that became known in the game as downtown, they added other distinct locations like an airport and a train station. Then they drew from familiar multiplayer maps from the Modern Warfare franchise, an approach they appreciated in Blackout's map, which I love. I do think that Blackout did it better though in terms of paying homage to past maps. So they weaved in the airplane husks of Scrapyard, broadcast TV station, and the prison building of the Petropavlovsk Gulag, among others. It combined eye-catching new landmarks with familiar callbacks to the Call of Duty franchise. So we started building the space, Kelly said, and we still didn't know precisely what we were going to do with it. So next up, in terms of changing the game so that it was distinctively different from PUBG and Fortnite. So as you guys know, Warzone took quite a different approach to development. So as well as Blackout provided inescapable reference points for developing a battle royale, they also created a major challenge by setting the perimeters of what defined the genre for players. As with most game development studios, Stoll noted, Infinity Ward's workers are also gamers and many were fans of the existing battle royales. Some developers who were enjoying those other games were reluctant to iterate too much on the battle royale formula. We are all hardcore gamers, Stoll said, we are all gamers and fans, but that makes it hard to do something new and different because obviously they're happy with what games are currently doing, but Warzone wouldn't succeed if it didn't try a new approach. So it was Kelly's appreciation of PUBG and his time gaming with his son that provided a foundational principle of Warzone's gameplay. At the time, Kelly and his son could only compete on PUBG using their family's one hardwired high-end PC. That meant the two had to take turns. They devised a rule, no camping. It was so fun to watch when we had the rules of the road for each other. Kelly said, it's like we need to have that in Warzone. The team set out to incorporate elements that incentivize players to move around Warzone's map. In battle royales at the time, the common pattern we saw was camp until the end. I have to say that's still an issue in Warzone. I mean, they've maybe tried to counter it a little bit, but honestly, I think there's more campers in Warzone than there are in Blackout. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it just feels that way, especially with the way the movement and the mechanics are a lot slower in Warzone. It feels like it definitely better promotes camping because people can literally just lean around corners. He said, how do we encourage players to be a bit more active and provide a strategy? I'd written down this thing, increasing in sensitivity, your life matters, but there's opportunities to respawn, and that became a real big design challenge for whatever we would do. So this is going into the Gulag and stuff, which I'll come on to in a little second, and I do think that's a really big thing, but not even just to help a camping problem, it's also really fun, and it also gives people a second chance. So the developers added a currency players could collect to spend a designated buy stations to purchase tools such as AI-controlled radar to spot enemies, and airstrikes and artillery barrages to take them down. They could even buy back an eliminated teammate. It kept players scavenging throughout the round even if they had already found satisfactory weapons and armor. The game's respawn dynamic played another big role in encouraging players to take calculated risks. So I know the respawn feature in Warzone is a bit controversial. Obviously it means that people have to use loadouts, that's the meta, and personally I think they should just scrap loadouts in all honesty. I think you should still be able to buy items, but even then it still is a bit of a broken system. It works well in some regards, but it has drawbacks too, because people can just buy OP things. I really do like the buyback system and the cash system though. I think it works well. I do think it needs some balancing adjustments with how things work though, or maybe they should just have other modes where there's no loadout drops. Anyways, Kelly wanted every player that fell in the early parts of the game to get a second chance at survival. At the time Infinity Ward was developing the 2v2 mode Gunfight for Modern Warfare, it gave Kelly an idea. Two fallen players get paired up against two others and fight to the death. Whoever wins the round gets respawned. Eventually they settled on simply making it a 1v1 duel. So I talked about this pre-release of Warzone, and this is the best feature Warzone has had implemented. The Gulag is an amazing feature and is something entirely unique, and it's also a great callback to the original Gulag, and they could also reuse stuff from Gunfight. Kelly also said he initially wanted the duel to take place on King, an indoor weapon training area with a wooden platform in the center. The designer with whom Kelly was sketching out the respawn dynamic had a different thought. He's like, no, I've got a better idea, let's do the Gulag. Kelly said it was a small map where two players are separated by several concrete and tile dividers. Above the combatants, players roam around a prison, barred ring overlooking the fight. And yeah, this is a great idea. I think that the Gulag works a lot better than King. Maybe they could mix it up though and you get a random Gulag, because honestly I think that the original Gulag is the best. The two new Gulags that we've had since the kind of remake of Nuketown and Standoff are just not as good, I don't think. The original Gulag is always going to be a classic. Maybe they could make it so you get a random Gulag instead of all going to the same spot. And so Warzone's biggest differentiator from other battle royales was born, but those big differences, which also included a player's ability to obtain their customized weapon loadouts and mechanic introduced to prompt players to care about progression and leveling up their in-game arsenal, weren't always welcomed by all of Infinity Ward's developers. One of the challenges in a mode where you have people playing other games like PUBG or whatever is the religion around, well, that's not battle royale, or that is battle royale, Stoll said. My god, Kelly interjected. We had designers going behind my back to Dave Stoll who would be like, you've got to stop him, this isn't battle royale, what is he doing? While the matter was ultimately settled according to their vision, it was not the only challenge the studio heads faced in bringing Warzone to fruition. So yeah, development is a bit funky. You obviously have a bunch of different developers, they fall out, they have different ideas and different visions, and that definitely causes a bunch of issues. Now in terms of playtesting, so playtesters packed Infinity Ward's offices 60 seated in front of a variety of PCs, Xboxes and PlayStations at one group of workstations, 40 at another. Their in-game avatars were picked around a single capture point in Modern Warfare's Ground War mode to test the limitations and fidelity of the software. The playtest required close coordination and had stretched well past midnight. Someone issued instructions using a bullhorn from the office floor. Everybody threw a grenade. Ultimately though, I think these decisions were good. I mean, Warzone is very popular. I guess a criticism of Warzone is it feels more like a large-scale multiplayer experience than a battle royale, because it does have a lot of multiplayer features. It's basically merged a lot of the multiplayer stuff with battle royale. I think it has worked out though, and it does suit Call of Duty, especially since multiplayer is what it is known for, and it does differentiate it from other battle royales out there, which are more focused on looting and survival. I was thinking to myself, I've been in this business 25 years and here I am throwing a grenade at 2 AM. Configuring the game to handle a massive map and player counts required the team to try to replicate many worst case scenarios like this, instances where a large number of players all executed the same technically demanding action that would stress the game or its servers. So essentially they would just throw all of the grenades, or I guess blow up all of the vehicles on the map so that they would cause bugs and crashes so that they could fix the issues. I remember pre-release when I was speaking to QA testers and developers and stuff like that, at one point there was over 2,000 bugs recorded that needed to be fixed. It's insane how many bugs need to get fixed. Hundreds get fixed daily. You want the world to have the graphical fidelity and realism of the best parts of the rest of your game, Kelly said, noting the many issues physics presents to ambitious game developers. But at the end of the day, there's only so small a footprint you can get this content down to, and you can get into the question of like, how many freaking gigabytes is this thing going to be? Which I guess has also been a big issue of Warzone. Luckily, over the last this year they've managed to scale down the size, but it is very huge if you own Modern Warfare and also Warzone together. And unfortunately, the developers are always limited by hardware limitations, so they can never fully execute their vision. It's just never 100% possible. They always have to scale things back. Ultimately, the developers compromised and reduced the maximum player count from 200 to 150. Even then, playtesting Warzone proved particularly challenging. Not only did they need to recruit 100 to 150 players for each test, but Kelly and Stoll discovered they needed a diversity to the lobbies as well. Infinity Ward's track record developing Call of Duty titles meant its workers had spent years playing the game. With so many skilled players, Stoll and Kelly were worried it was skewing the test results. So obviously they needed a mix of different player types, people who had no idea what they were doing, really talented players, and people in between, so that they could balance the game properly. Imagine what that yields from a playtest point of view, Stoll said. Then an average Joe would come into play and they just get, wrecked, because everybody else is a pro player. The combination of testing for long hours and the competitive nature of the game led to some tension, though he maintains it never reached the point of toxicity. Stoll noticed an excess of trash talking and worried the team was getting a bit too worked up. That sounds a bit toxic. I mean, honestly, the gaming industry is just known for this. A lot of dodgy stuff goes on in the workplace, especially developers and QA testers clashing, and the QA testers clashing with each other, the developers clashing with each other. At the end of the day, you have literally thousands of people pumping out one game with everyone having different opinions and different wants and different needs, and it's very difficult. Compromises have to be made, so they'd begin the playtests and Kelly would be like, nobody speak. Kelly wasn't immune to frustration. Sometimes Kelly said his squad would try to test a specific dynamic in the game, only to be killed as soon as they landed. I would get so angry, Kelly said, and there are times that you are so stressed, you're tired, and I was so angry that I could literally turn on Demigod boost for myself and be like, F you guys. So I guess obviously he has all the commands and the powers to give himself Godmode and hacks, which is quite ironic considering Warzone has had a pretty bad hacking issue. For all of the stress and tension, the playtest also produced some of Stoll's fondest memories during development. Man, people were screaming at each other, yelling at each other, and hooting and hollering, he said. It's like when you were in a room together playing and you were trash talking each other. That makes it more fun than it would be in the real world when you are playing online. So in terms of the launch and beyond, so obviously it launched on March 10th, 2020, and the players went crazy. Right now it is over 100 million, having it been out for over a year. It goes on to say, I loved all the people speaking up on snipers at the top of one of the buildings of downtown or whatever. He said, like, I remember the first time people started flying around with the helicopters and, chopping people up, taking out snipers in the helicopter. That was awesome. Then there's a bunch of stuff about the struggles of developing under COVID-19. I'm not really going to delve into that. It's just talking about how they managed to get the actors in to record for Black Ops Cold War's operators. But the last thing he said, as an ongoing live game, their labor on Warzone continues. Working around a schedule on 6 2-month-long seasons, Infinity Ward continued to add new content and modes throughout 2020. Since its release, the map has evolved throughout the course of the year, adding a train, then a subway network, and blowing the top off Verdansk's massive domed soccer stadium. And obviously we recently had the Nuke event. Personally, I haven't really liked Verdansk's map changes. A lot of other people really haven't either. They've tried to be a bit realistic, I guess. Blackout once again had that fun factor, had that more arcadey factor where they didn't have to go by logic. They could randomly add the zombies map buried onto the map and no one cared. It was awesome. They said while Infinity Ward has for the moment handed off most of Warzone's maintenance work to Ravensoft, Stoll did note that Ravensoft have been working on Warzone since its very conception. And I've talked about this before. Warzone did the majority of the work on the map and stuff like that. Infinity Ward oversaw the project, but obviously they were also focusing on the main Modern Warfare game. So they were kind of overseeing Raven Software, who did a lot of the work, and Raven Software are now commanding it, and they have taken the lead. But Infinity Ward are still doing work. I guess Treyarch are probably doing some work too. It's a big collaborative effort, really. They said designers from Raven Software worked with Infinity Ward from the outset, and also Treyarch with the integration of Black Ops Cold War somewhat. They said Kelly and Stoll are currently working on the details for Season 6, which will begin in late 2021. Kelly also said they have planned out Warzone's broad strokes for several years in the future. Some things we want to do mode-wise, geography-wise, they take more time, Kelly said. So they naturally need to slot in later, but we do think about this on a multi-year basis, and I will tell you this, we are doing our damnness right now on top of what's to come from before. So yeah, there's big things planned. Apparently there's going to be something big for Season 6 of Black Ops Cold War. We don't really know what that is. We do know that a nuked version of Verdansk is going to come at some point, the post-nuked version, and we do know that Verdansk was destroyed during the Cold War, so I wonder if the 1984 version of Verdansk is going to get nuked again. Then we might go to present day in time for the Modern Warfare sequel in presumably 2022, and we could play on the post-Cold War nuked version of Verdansk. I wonder, since he talked about geography, if we could end up seeing the Ural Mountains map, because obviously this is apparently cancelled, but like I talked about earlier, we now know from Season 3's cutscene that Verdansk takes place right next to the Ural Mountains, so the fact that they take place right next to each other really suggests that Warzone could very easily move over to the Ural Mountains if they are so close to each other. Maybe that could be something with Call of Duty 2021 WWII Vanguard, developed by Sledgehammer Games. Maybe that could be the big thing for Season 6 or later on, because we know that Nazis are going to be escaping from the Dark Ether within this next Berlin Zombies map in Black Ops Cold War, and considering it's all one storyline now, what if the zombies then spread to Verdansk in 1984, and that could be how it ties into World War II Vanguard. Anyways, that's everything I wanted to talk about within today's video. As a quick reminder, this video has been kindly sponsored by Nvidia and Scan Computers, which you can check out via the link in this video's description. You can also check out the article for everything that I have discussed in this video. Thank you for watching the video, and make sure to subscribe if you're not here for the latest and greatest Call of Duty news and information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.